The evening had started like any ordinary day. The sun was already low when he finished helping his uncle stack some boxes in the small storage room behind the house. Dust floated in the air like tiny feathers, and the smell of old wood and forgotten things filled the space. He didn't expect to find anything interesting there. It was just a job he wanted to finish quickly so he could go home, eat, and rest. But then his hand touched something cold and square under a pile of newspapers. He pulled it out without thinking much and saw an old portable radio. The kind people used years ago before phones became everything. It had scratches on the sides and one of the buttons was a little loose. He tapped it lightly, wondering if the battery still worked. His uncle laughed and said it probably wouldn't even turn on. But he tried anyway. When he pressed the button, nothing happened at first. He pressed again, a little harder this time, and suddenly a soft crackling sound escaped from the speaker. Then a slow, calm stream of music began to play. It wasn't like the songs he heard on the bus or in shops. This one had no words. It was just sound gentle, warm, quiet at first, then rising little by little. He froze. For a moment, it felt like the whole room became still. Even the dust in the air seemed to stop moving. The melody was simple but full, like someone speaking without talking. It touched something inside him, something he didn't even know was waiting to be found. He didn't know who the composer was or what the piece was called. All he knew was how it made him feel. A strange calmness spread through his chest, as if a heavy door inside him had quietly opened. The feeling was new, but it didn't scare him. It made him curious. His uncle noticed the look on his face and smiled. He said he used to listen to music like that when he was younger, especially on long evenings when he needed to relax. But to the young man, this wasn't just relaxing. It was something different, something deeper. He wasn't even sure how to explain it. The music played only for a short while before the battery died with a soft click. But the feeling stayed. Long after they locked the storage room, long after he walked home, long after the night grew quiet, that melody remained in his mind. When he reached his room, he sat on the edge of his bed for a few minutes, still thinking about what he had heard. It was strange how a simple tune could leave such a strong mark on his heart. He didn't grow up around much music. His family didn't have speakers or fancy earbuds. They listened to the radio only for news or cricket updates. Music wasn't something they talked about. So this experience felt new, like someone had handed him a key he'd never asked for but desperately needed. He took out his phone and searched for music without words. He didn't even know the right term to use, but eventually he found something similar. He played a piece softly, and the same warm feeling returned. It wasn't the exact melody from the radio, but it had the same soul. He lay back on the bed and let the sound fill the small room. That night, he didn't fall asleep quickly like he usually did. He kept listening, letting the music take him to places he couldn't describe. It felt like he was floating somewhere peaceful, somewhere far from the noise of daily life. He didn't realize it then, but that was the beginning of a long journey. A journey he didn't plan for but was meant to take. The next morning he woke up with the music still in his mind. Usually he woke up thinking about work, chores, or what he needed to do for the day. But today felt different. He felt lighter somehow. Even when he walked to the bus stop, the noise of traffic didn't bother him as much. It was like the music had left a protective layer around him as he sat on the bus. He played another classical track he had downloaded the night before. He didn't know anything about the composer or the meaning behind the piece, but he didn't need to. The sound alone made him feel like someone understood what he couldn't put into words. He looked out the window, watching the city move around him, workers opening shops, children running with backpacks, older people waiting for the morning sun to warm up the air. Everything looked normal, yet he felt something new inside him. He felt connected to the world in a way he never had before. At work, the day was busy as usual. But whenever he felt tired or stressed, he remembered that short tune from the radio, and his chest relaxed. During lunch break, instead of chatting or scrolling endlessly on his phone, he looked up more pieces of classical music. Some were slow and peaceful. Some were strong and intense. Some sounded sad yet beautiful. He didn't understand why they made him feel so much, but he liked that they did. A coworker walked by and asked what he was listening to. When he explained it, the coworker raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Classical music?" he asked with a smile. "You don't seem like the type." He laughed and said he didn't think he was either. But deep down, he already felt something special growing. When he returned home that evening, he went straight to the old portable radio still sitting on the table. He wanted to hear the original piece again. He opened the battery cover, cleaned off the dust, and searched the drawers until he found a pair of old batteries. They weren't new, but he hoped they would work. He placed the batteries in, held his breath, and pressed the button. The radio turned on with a crackle. He slowly rotated the small dial, passing through random sounds, news programs, talk shows, folk music. Then suddenly, a familiar kind of soft, elegant sound floated through the speaker. Not the exact same melody as before, but close. Close enough that his heart lifted. He sat down on the floor and leaned his back against the wall. He closed his eyes, letting the room fade away. The melody rose gently, like a calm wave, then drifted down again. He felt something warm spread through him, the same warmth from the day before, stronger now. He stayed like that for a long time, listening, breathing slowly, feeling every note. He wasn't thinking about work. He wasn't thinking about problems. He wasn't thinking about anything. He was simply there. The music felt like someone holding his hand from the inside. Later that night, during dinner, his mother asked why he seemed unusually quiet but peaceful. He smiled and said he was fine. He didn't know how to explain what he felt. It wasn't something he could put into simple words like, "I like the music." It was deeper. It was as if the music had reached a part of him that had been waiting for attention for years. After dinner, he went back to his room and played more classical music while doing small tasks, folding clothes, cleaning the desk, sorting his school papers. Everything felt easier with the music playing softly in the background. He didn't feel rushed or irritated. He didn't feel tired even though the day had been long. It was like the music was guiding his thoughts, helping him stay calm. That night again, he slept with music playing softly. He dreamed of wide-open fields, quiet lakes, and long empty roads where the wind moved slowly. He hadn't had peaceful dreams like that in a long time. The following week, he kept listening. When he walked, when he waited, when he rested. The music became a companion he didn't know he needed. It made him more aware of small things, the sound of birds, the rhythm of footsteps, the way sunlight touched objects. He began noticing details he used to ignore. When schoolwork stressed him, he put on a slow piano piece and felt his thoughts settle. When he felt lonely, a violin piece kept him company. When he felt unsure of the future, a strong orchestral track made him feel brave. The music matched every emotion he had, even emotions he didn't fully understand yet. One day at school, a teacher noticed him listening during break. Instead of telling him to put the phone away, the teacher smiled and said, "You know, these pieces have stories behind them." The young man looked up, curious. That single sentence planted a seed in his mind. Stories. Behind music with no words? The idea fascinated him. He didn't know much about classical composers or their lives, but he wanted to learn. He wanted to know why some pieces sounded sad, why some felt like hope, why some felt like heartbreak. He felt like the music was speaking to him, and he wanted to understand the language. When he went home that day, he searched online about the history of classical music. He read small articles at first, then watched short videos. He learned that many composers wrote pieces to express emotions they couldn't explain to others' pain. Joy, fear, love, dreams, memories. He realized he wasn't the only one who felt things that were hard to say. That idea connected with him deeply. Slowly, he began building a playlist. Every time he heard a piece that touched him, he saved it. He didn't care if it was popular or old or unknown. He just saved whatever made him feel something. His playlist grew day by day, becoming a kind of personal diary, track representing a moment, a feeling, a memory. One evening, while sitting on the rooftop, he played a piece that started with a soft violin and ended with an emotional swell of strings. The sky was turning orange and the wind was cool. As he listened, he felt a warmth spread through his chest. He didn't know exactly what the feeling was. Maybe peace, maybe gratitude, maybe something deeper. He whispered to himself, "Why does this music feel like it understands me?" He didn't expect an answer, but he already knew it didn't matter. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel alone, and he didn't know it yet. But this was only the beginning of how classical music would change his life forever. The change in his life did not happen all at once. It came slowly, the same way the morning light enters a room through a small window. Every day, classical music became a little more important to him, even though he never planned it that way. At first, he listened just to relax, but soon he realized he was listening to feel something he didn't have words for. Each morning started with soft piano notes. He didn't choose them for any special reason. He just liked how gentle they felt in the early hours. As he got ready for the day, the music moved with him, quiet steps, calm breaths, a peaceful mind. It was strange how even simple things like washing his face or tying his shoes felt easier when the music was there. On the bus ride, he played pieces he had saved in his playlist. The bus was usually crowded and loud, but with his earphones on, the world outside felt distant. He watched people rushing, yelling, arguing, laughing, living their own stories, while inside his ears, the music painted a different picture, one that had color, emotion, and space to breathe. He didn't know much about the composers, but he felt like they understood him better than the people around him. Some pieces made him feel like he was walking through a forest. Others felt like rain falling on an empty street. Some felt like memories he had forgotten. Slowly, he began noticing how different sounds touched different parts of him. One afternoon, he came home after a long day, feeling tired and frustrated. Nothing big had happened, but the small things had piled up. Bus, extra work, a small argument, and a headache that wouldn't go away. He sat on his bed and took a deep breath. Instead of complaining or scrolling through social media, he reached for his earphones. He played a slow violin piece. The sound started soft, like someone speaking softly in a quiet room. As the music grew, something inside him softened too. His mind, which had been full of noise and worry, began to settle. It amazed him how a melody could calm him more than anything else. That was the moment he understood something important. Music was not just entertainment for him anymore. It was becoming a way to understand his own emotions. A few days later, during school break, he sat under a tree and played another piece. It was gentle, warm, and had a bright sound that lifted his mood. While listening, he thought about how life can feel heavy sometimes, even when everything seems normal on the outside. He remembered days when he felt things he didn't know how to explain: stress, fear, loneliness, excitement, hope. The music made those feelings easier to understand. It was like someone translated them for him. As the days went by, he found himself growing more curious. He wanted to know why certain music made him feel brave, and why some music made him quiet. He wanted to know the stories behind the melodies. He wanted to understand why composers wrote pieces that sounded like heartbreak, or happiness, or long journeys. One evening, he sat with the old radio again. The batteries were weak, and sometimes the sound faded, but he didn't mind. Every piece he heard felt like a doorway to a different world. Some pieces were full of energy, like a fast heartbeat. Others were calm, like sunlight on water. He listened with his eyes closed, letting the music show him pictures in his mind. While listening, he felt a memory rise in him, something from a long time ago, something he had forgotten. It was a memory of sitting alone at school when he was younger, feeling left out. No one was unkind to him, but he always felt slightly different from everyone else. He didn't know how to explain it back then. But now, as the music played, he realized why that memory surfaced. The music touched a part of him that remembered being quietly lonely. He realized that classical music didn't just make him feel good. It made him feel everything: memories, emotions, hopes, dreams. It helped him understand himself without forcing him to speak. A few days later, something surprising happened. A teacher, the same one who noticed him listening earlier, saw him again during break. This time, the teacher sat beside him and asked what he liked about this kind of music. He thought for a moment, then said softly, "It makes me feel things I can't say." The teacher nodded, like that answer made complete sense. They talked for a few minutes about how classical music is full of stories, even though it has no words. The teacher then pulled out an old book from his bag and handed it to him. This explains some of the stories behind the music. The teacher said, "I think you'll enjoy it." He took the book carefully, almost afraid to damage it. When he reached home that evening, he sat on his bed and opened the book slowly. It was filled with short stories about composers, how some struggled, how some wrote music when they were sad or hopeful or scared, how some created melodies based on memories or dreams. He read page after page. Feeling like he had found secret messages hidden inside the music he loved, he learned that one composer wrote a piece. After losing someone important, another wrote a melody out of excitement for a new beginning. Another created music to express loneliness. As he read, he played the pieces on his phone and tried to hear the emotions behind the notes. Suddenly, classical music wasn't just sound. It was storytelling. It was history. It was emotion. It was life. He spent hours that night reading and listening, connecting each story to each melody. And in doing so, he felt like he was slowly learning a new language. A language that didn't need spoken words. Over the next few weeks, his playlist grew bigger. He created separate folders, one for calm moments, one for stressful days, one for evenings when he needed comfort. He even created a folder for moments when he felt proud of himself, even if those moments were small. The more he listened, the more aware he became of his own emotional world. For the first time in his life, he understood that it was okay to have complicated feelings. The music taught him that emotions weren't weaknesses. They were signs of being alive. He started noticing emotions in other people too. When someone looked upset, he understood that maybe they were carrying a silent story inside them. When someone seemed angry, he thought maybe they needed a moment of calm just like he did. When someone smiled for no reason, he felt happy for them in a simple way. Music made him more human. One evening, he sat on the rooftop again, letting the cooler evening air touch his face. He played a piece with a slow start and a bright ending. The sky turned pink and orange, and the wind carried distant city sounds. He thought about how his life had changed without him even noticing. A simple tune from an old radio had opened a new world for him. A world where he was allowed to feel everything without embarrassment. A world where emotions were not problems, they were colors. He whispered to himself, "I didn't know music could do this." He didn't say it to anyone. He didn't need to. It felt like the music already knew. As the days continued to pass, he kept discovering new pieces. Each one added something to his life, a new feeling, a new thought, a new lesson. Some pieces taught him patience. Some taught him strength. Some taught him gentleness. He didn't talk about this discovery much. Not because he wanted to hide it, but because it felt personal, almost sacred. It felt like something between him and the music. But even without speaking, the change inside him grew. People around him noticed he had become calmer, more thoughtful, more present. He wasn't quick to react anymore. He listened more. He understood more. That was the power classical music had given him. Deeper understanding of his own heart. He still didn't know everything about the world of classical music, but he didn't need to. He was learning slowly, one piece at a time, one feeling at a time, and without realizing it. He was preparing himself for the challenges that would test him, push him, and shape him even more. But for now, all he knew was this: classical music had become more than a discovery. It had become a part of him, and his journey with it was only just beginning. The days ahead were not easy for him, though he didn't know it at first. Life has a way of changing without warning, and sometimes it starts with small signs that you ignore because you think they are just temporary. But the truth is, even small things can grow heavy when they keep coming one after another. College had started, and with it came responsibilities he had never felt before. The classrooms were bigger, the buildings were larger, the teachers spoke faster, and everyone around him seemed to know what they were doing. He tried to keep up, but each day felt like he was climbing a hill that kept getting steeper. Assignments piled up. deadlines came too quickly. Some subjects felt impossible to understand, no matter how hard he tried. His family didn't complain, but he could feel the silent pressure in their eyes, the hope that he would do well, that he would make them proud. He wanted that too, but wanting and achieving weren't always the same. Classical music was still with him. Slowly he listened less. Not because he didn't love it, but because he felt too tired, too busy, too overwhelmed. Whenever he tried to sit and enjoy a piece, his mind filled with thoughts of unfinished work, bills, transportation, and everything else that weighed on him. One evening, he came home exhausted. His back hurt from sitting all day, his eyes were burning from staring at books and screens, and his mind felt like a heavy box full of scattered papers. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. He didn't even have the energy to turn on his music. His mind kept replaying every mistake, every worry. He thought about how peaceful life felt just a year ago. He missed that version of himself, the boy who would sit quietly under a tree and listen to soft piano notes without worrying about anything. Now, even breathing felt like a task. He didn't want to tell anyone how he felt. He didn't want to worry his family or make his friends think he couldn't handle things. So he kept everything inside. But carrying everything alone slowly became too much. One day after class, he walked through the campus feeling like he was floating through fog. His friends asked him if he wanted to join them for tea, but he politely refused. He didn't want to talk or laugh or pretend he was okay. He just wanted silence. As he walked across the courtyard, he heard a faint sound, soft, gentle, almost hidden under the noise of students talking. He paused and looked around. The sound was coming from the auditorium building. He wasn't sure why, but something pulled him toward it. He walked to the door of the auditorium, expecting it to be locked. But when he pushed lightly, it opened. Inside, the hall was dimly lit, and a group of musicians were sitting on stage rehearsing. Violins, cellos, a piano, and a few other instruments he didn't recognize. He stepped inside quietly and sat in the last row, hoping no one would notice him. The musicians were playing a piece that started soft and slow, almost like the whisper of a memory. Then it grew, a wave of sound rising gently, then falling again. As he listened, something inside him cracked open. He felt his throat tighten, and his eyes fill with tears he didn't understand. He covered his face with his hands and leaned forward, letting the music wash over him. It was like the sound carried every emotion he had locked away: stress, fear, exhaustion, loneliness. He didn't cry loudly. He didn't break down. It was a quiet release, the kind that hurts and heals at the same time. He didn't realize how much he had been holding inside until that moment. The music softened the tight knots in his heart, one note at a time. He stayed until the musicians finished their rehearsal. When they paused, he quietly stood and left the hall, wiping his eyes before anyone could see. But he walked out different from how he had entered. He felt lighter, not because his problems had disappeared, but because the weight inside him had finally been allowed to breathe. That night, he went home and opened his playlist again. He chose a piece he used to love but hadn't heard in a long time. As the music played, he lay on his bed, letting it fill the room. He realized something important. Classical music wasn't just a hobby for him. It was a lifeline. It had helped him before, and it could help him now. The next morning, he woke early, earlier than usual. He played soft music while getting ready, and for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel rushed. He felt like he was slowly returning to himself, but life didn't magically become easy overnight. The stress didn't vanish. The assignments were still there. The expectations were still high. But he started using music as a tool, not to escape life, but to manage it. Whenever he felt overwhelmed, he took a short break. He found a quiet corner, put on a calming piece, and let the music slow down his racing thoughts. He learned to breathe again. One afternoon, while waiting for the bus, he listened to a strong orchestral piece with bold notes and rising energy. It felt powerful, almost like someone telling him he could keep going, even if things felt impossible. That piece became his strength on hard days. Another time, during a quiet evening, he found a gentle piano piece that felt like a soft hand on his shoulder. It reminded him that it was okay to feel tired. It was okay to feel lost sometimes. He created new playlists, one for courage, one for calm, one for late-night studying, and one for moments when he felt like giving up but needed a little push. Slowly, people around him noticed a change. A friend told him, "You look more peaceful these days." A teacher said, "You seem more focused lately." His family noticed he became quieter but more thoughtful. They didn't know why, but they felt he was growing. One weekend, his college announced a music event. He didn't think about joining, but he felt drawn to attend. The auditorium was full this time, unlike the quiet rehearsal he had seen before. He sat near the back again, but this time was ready to feel. When the concert began, the first piece was slow and emotional, and he felt his heart open again, but this time not with sadness. It opened with understanding. The next piece was strong and filled with energy, and he felt brave. Another was bright and hopeful, making him smile softly as he listened. He realized something he had never understood before. Classical music wasn't just sound. It was emotion turned into movement, feeling turned into notes, life turned into melody. Each piece told a story, and somehow every story connected with his own life. When the concert ended, he didn't rush out. He stayed in his seat for a while, thinking. The hall slowly emptied, but he just sat there quietly. Letting the last notes fade inside him, he thought about the hardest moments of the past few months. The nights he stayed awake worrying. The days he felt buried under pressure. The moments he felt alone, lost, or afraid. All of it felt softer now. It's easier to breathe through. The music had given him something he didn't know he needed permission to feel. Outside the hall, he walked slowly toward the bus stop. The night air was cool, and the city lights flickered in the distance. He put on another classical piece, this one gentle and warm. As he listened, realized the truth. The hardest part of growing up wasn't the work or the pressure. It was facing your own emotions. It was learning how to carry them without letting them crush you. And music. This music was teaching him how to do that. When he reached home, he sat on his bed and opened a blank page in his notebook. He wrote a single line, "Today, the music reminded me that I'm still human." He didn't write anything else. He didn't need to. He felt calmer that night than he had in months. He slept early, with soft notes playing in his ears. And for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful about tomorrow. The stress wasn't gone, but the fear inside him had changed. It no longer felt like a storm he couldn't escape. It felt like something he could face, one step at a time. And deep inside, he knew this was just another beginning. The world of classical music still had so much to teach him about strength, about patience, about understanding himself. He didn't know what challenges were coming next, but he knew he wouldn't be facing them alone. Not anymore. The music was with him. The train ride back to the city felt quiet, almost too quiet, like the world was still catching its breath after everything that had happened. He sat by the window, watching the blurred trees pass by, feeling each moment settle inside him. The music he had played at the festival still echoed in his mind. Every note, every pause, every breath he took during that performance was still alive in him. He didn't want the feeling to fade, but he knew that once he returned home, life would begin again. With all its noise and demands, the city greeted him with its usual rush. Cars honking, people moving fast, street vendors calling out to strangers. But he walked slowly, almost calmly, like he was carrying something delicate inside him. He returned to his small apartment, placed his bag on the floor, and sat on the edge of his bed. It felt like he had lived a whole lifetime during the festival, and now he was back to the same quiet room. But something had changed. He didn't turn on the lights. Instead, he sat in the half-dark, letting the last bit of evening light spill through the window. It painted soft lines across the room, and for a moment he imagined he was still standing on that stage. With the warm glow of lamps on his face, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The city noise softened in the distance, almost like it was becoming part of a melody. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel lost. He felt more grounded, more aware of the space he was in. As if the music he had played had stitched something inside him back together. Later that night he placed his keyboard on the table, plugged it in and gently pressed a few keys. The sound was soft, tiny compared to the grand piano he had played during the festival, but it was enough. He played slowly, just letting his fingers move in whatever direction they wanted. This wasn't rehearsal. This wasn't preparation for a performance. It was just him, the sound, and the quiet around him. For hours he sat there, playing soft notes that drifted through the apartment. It felt peaceful, almost like rediscovering a part of himself he had forgotten existed. The next morning, he woke up early. The sky was still pale blue, and the streets were quieter than usual. He made a small breakfast and sat by the window, noticing how calm he felt. The memories of the festival filled him with warmth, but he also felt something else, a new kind of responsibility. He had seen what music could do, how it could reach people, move them, comfort them. And now he wanted to understand it better. He spent the next few days reading about classical music again, like he had done when he first began learning. He listened to recordings from famous composers, not just for enjoyment, but with a deeper curiosity. He tried to understand how they shaped emotion through sound, how they turned simple notes into deep feelings. Sometimes he would pause a recording and try to play, same piece on his keyboard. It wasn't perfect, but each attempt taught him something new. He wasn't trying to copy anyone. He wanted to learn how to express himself more clearly through music. One afternoon, he decided to visit a nearby concert hall. It was an old building with tall ceilings and large wooden doors. He had walked past it many times, but never really stepped inside. When he entered, the cool air wrapped around him, and the faint smell of old wood filled the space. He noticed a small crowd in front of the stage. An orchestra was rehearsing. He stood at the back, listening quietly. The conductor moved fluidly, using his hands to guide the musicians. The violins played in soft layers, the cellos added depth, and the flutes drifted through the hall like light air. Even though the audience was empty, the music felt alive. He watched every detail. The concentration in the musicians' faces, the small signals between them, the moments when they breathed together before starting a phrase. It made him think about how connected people could be through music without even speaking. When the rehearsal ended, he was about to leave when one of the stage workers approached him and asked if he was part of the event. He shook his head and explained that he had just wandered in to listen. The worker smiled and said, "It happens often, especially with people who love music." Before leaving, he walked past the stage one more time and imagined himself sitting behind a grand piano, performing again. The idea didn't scare him anymore. It felt possible. It felt like something he truly wanted. On his way home, he stopped at a small music shop. The walls were lined with instruments, violins, flutes, guitars, and a beautiful upright piano in the corner. He placed his hand gently on the keys, feeling the smooth surface. It wasn't as grand as the one from the festival, but it had a warm, inviting sound. The shop owner approached him and asked if he played. He nodded quietly. The owner let him sit and try the piano. He played a calm melody, letting the notes flow gently. A few customers stopped to listen, but he didn't look at them. He just kept playing, letting the sound fill the room. When he finished, the owner told him he had a natural way of expressing emotion and that not many people played like that. It felt good to hear those words. Not like praise, but like someone noticing something he himself had begun to notice. He didn't buy the piano that day, but he left the shop with a feeling of excitement, like something new was opening up for him. In the following weeks, he played more often, sometimes staying up late into the night. He wrote new melodies, short ones at first, but each one carried a piece of his feelings. Sometimes they sounded hopeful. Sometimes they sounded like quiet sadness. Sometimes like warm memories. He wasn't trying to create anything big. He just wanted to understand his own emotions better. One evening, while writing a melody, he received a message from someone he had met at the festival, another musician who admired his performance. They told him about a new community music event happening in the city. It wasn't a competition or a formal concert. It was a space where musicians played for the public. Sharing their work without pressure, the idea appealed to him. He thought about it for a long time that night. He wasn't afraid anymore, but he wanted to make sure he was ready. Not ready in terms of skill, but ready to share his heart again through music. Finally, decided he would join. The next day he walked to a quiet park and sat on a bench. The trees moved softly with the wind, and children played in the distance. He listened to the sound of the world around him and imagined what he wanted to perform. Not something loud or dramatic, something gentle, something honest. He played the melody he had been writing the night before in his mind. It was simple, soft, but full of meaning. It felt like a conversation he had with himself, a reminder of how far he had come as the sun began to set. He stood up and walked home with steady steps. The event was still a week away, but he felt calm. He knew what he wanted to play. And more importantly, he knew why he wanted to play. Not for applause, not for recognition, not even for validation, but because music had given him something he once thought he had lost, and now he wanted to return the gift. That night, he played the melody again on his keyboard. Each note felt warm and full of emotion. He didn't rush. He didn't force anything. He just let the sound move naturally. And for the first time, the room didn't feel small or lonely. It felt like a beginning. The night before the community music event, he sat by the window with the lights off, watching the city glow in small dots across the skyline. The gentle hum of the streets below mingled with the soft breeze that slipped through the window. He felt calm, but also aware that something meaningful was about to happen. Not something big in the outside world, but something big inside him. He placed his hands on his keyboard again and played the melody he had been creating over the past week. Every time he played it, it felt a little bit different. Not because he changed the notes, but because the feeling inside him shifted softly depending on the moment. The melody had become like a personal mirror, showing him parts of himself he hadn't noticed before. He wasn't worried about standing in front of people. Not anymore. What mattered to him was sharing something real, something honest, something that came from the same place the festival performance had awakened. When he finally went to bed, the melody still played quietly in his thoughts, as if it followed him into his dreams. The next morning was bright and warm. Sunlight poured through his window, and for a moment, he just sat there, letting the light rest on his face. He took a slow breath and smiled to himself. Today wasn't a big competition or a formal concert. It was something simpler, something more human. And he liked that. He wore simple clothes, nothing fancy. He packed his small keyboard into a soft case and stepped outside. The streets were already lively, but he didn't rush. He walked at a comfortable pace, taking in the sounds around him. A bus braking, someone calling out to a friend across the road, birds singing from a tree. Every sound felt like part of a larger rhythm. The event was held in an open plaza near the center of the city. When he arrived, he saw people setting up chairs, musicians tuning their instruments, and a few early visitors wandering around with coffee cups in their hands. The air buzzed with quiet excitement. A volunteer welcomed him with a bright smile and showed him where he could set up. His spot was near the front, close to a few small speakers. He placed his keyboard on the stand and checked the cables, making sure everything worked properly. As he tested the sound, a soft tone filled the space. A few people nearby turned their heads and listened for a moment. He felt a small warmth in his chest. Not pride, more like connection. He sat down for a moment and watched the other performers. A young girl practiced a violin piece, her bow trembling slightly as she played. Two friends rehearsed a guitar duet, laughing softly whenever they made mistakes. An older man tuned a wooden flute with great care, holding it like something precious. Everyone had their own story, their own emotion, their own reason for being there. When the event finally began, the host greeted the crowd and explained that the purpose of the gathering was simple: to celebrate music in its purest form. Not perfection, not performance, just expression. One by one, musicians stepped onto the small stage and shared their pieces. Some performances were smooth, others a little shaky, but all carried a kind of honesty that made the atmosphere warm and welcoming. He listened closely, letting each piece wash over him. The violin girl played a soft melody that reminded him of early mornings. The guitar duet played a lively tune that made the audience smile. The older man with the flute played something slow and full of memory. Finally, his name was called. He stood up slowly, took a deep breath, and walked toward the stage. The sunlight touched his shoulders as he sat down at his keyboard. For a moment he looked at the crowd. They weren't huge in number, but they were attentive, waiting, open. He placed his fingers on the keys. Then he began. The first note was soft, almost like a whisper. It drifted into the warm air and disappeared gently. The second note followed, then the third. The melody grew slowly, like a quiet thought, becoming clearer with each passing moment. He didn't think about technique or mistakes. He didn't think about who was watching or listening. He just played, letting his emotions move through the music. Some notes felt like warmth. Others felt like longing. Some felt like hope. And the melody held all of them together smoothly, like a story without words. As he played, he felt everything around him fade away. The plaza, the crowd, even the city noise softened until only the sound remained. He wasn't performing. He was sharing. When he reached the final part of the melody, he let the notes become softer and softer, as if they were slowly drifting into the sky. And when the last note faded, the silence that followed felt peaceful. Then the applause came, gentle but heartfelt. He looked up, surprised by how moved people seemed. A few smiled warmly. Some nodded in quiet appreciation. One woman placed a hand over her chest, as if the music had touched something deep inside her. He felt a warmth bloom in his chest. Not the sharp excitement of applause, but a deep, calm feeling, a sense that he had reached people, that he had shared a part of himself that words couldn't explain. After stepping down from the stage, several people approached him. They told him his piece felt emotional, comforting, or peaceful. Some said it reminded them of personal memories they hadn't thought of in years. One person simply said, "It made me feel something," and that alone meant more than anything. He thanked each of them. It's not out of politeness, but because he genuinely felt grateful. Their reactions confirmed something he had only recently begun to understand. Music wasn't just sound. It was connection. Later, as the event continued, he found a quiet corner and sat down. His keyboard rested beside him, but he didn't touch it. He just watched the people, the movement, the sunlight shifting across the plaza. He realized something important. For years, he had thought music was about skill or technique or winning something. But now he knew the truth. Music was about feeling, about giving, about reaching hearts. It was about taking something inside yourself, something soft, something fragile, and turning it into sound so others could understand it too. As the sun began to set and the plaza emptied slowly, he packed up his keyboard and stood for a moment. The air felt cool, and a gentle breeze brushed against his face. He looked around and smiled to himself. This wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of a new one. He walked home slowly, letting the last light of the day guide him. He didn't feel lost anymore. He didn't feel unsure. He felt full of music, full of emotion, full of something meaningful. When he reached his apartment, he placed his keyboard back on the table, but he didn't play it right away. Instead, he sat on his bed and looked around the room. The space no longer felt small. It no longer felt lonely. It felt like a place where something beautiful had begun, a place where music had come alive. And he knew that from now on, he would keep playing, not for stages, not for applause, but for the simple truth that music could make people feel everything, including him.